All right, welcome back. Episode number 123.
That's such a great number. That's an easy number.
Easy to remember. We got a ways to go to 1, 2, 3, 4, though. Got a ways to go.
We got a little ways.
Anyway, I'm Tom Burton here with Brandon Lee. Carson, unfortunately, is stuck in a meeting, but we have another great guest here in the middle, Lee Sauls. Lee, welcome back, I believe.
Yeah. Second timer.
Yes. Second timer. I want to do like they do on Saturday Night Live. I want to get into the 5-timers club.
I always think about that. I think we've got Larry Levine coming up in a couple of weeks, and I think that'll be his.
It might be his fourth. Fourth.
I think he's our Alec Baldwin.
Okay.
Yeah. Right now.
You got to get him the jacket with the 5 on the lapel.
That's true. Yeah, we'll have to celebrate that. So, well, hey, let's jump in. I think today's a good episode, and Lee's got a lot to share. We're talking about playbooks and organizing the sales process, which I've been hearing a lot about that lately with people, confusion or inconsistency. So I think today's going to be a good topic, huh, Tom?
Yeah. Before we start, though, do you want to tell everybody who sponsors the show? And
I do, because I get in trouble if I don't do it for my team. So everybody, welcome to Mastering Modern Selling. If you're here live with us, you're on LinkedIn or YouTube, and you add comments, we're going to see them, and we like to pull those in and answer your questions or respond to your comments. So please do that. And if you're on the podcast, thank you for listening. We really appreciate you. And hey, if you're finding value out of this, we'd really appreciate, give us a review. And if you really like it, want to share it with people, it's real simple on your phone, screen capture it, share it with people, let them know about Mastering Modern Selling. But my job today is to know that this episode is sponsored by Fist Bump. It happens to be my company, which is part of the reason why we do the show and promoting it. And hey, at Fist Bump, we help C-suite and sales leaders become more connected, more relevant, and more influential in their industry. We're talking about playbooks today. We have a LinkedIn outreach playbook where we take content from shows like the one you're listening to, and we put it into an outreach campaign for emails and blogs and newsletters and LinkedIn direct messages. At the core of everything we do, it really revolves around this modern approach to everything we talk about on the show. It's not about pitchy and having commission breath. It's about sharing really valuable information that is very applicable to your ideal customers. So as an example today, we've got Lee. He's going to share great information, great educational insights. And afterwards, we'll take content from the show and we use it in emails and blogs and newsletters and social content. We share it with in direct messages. And we do that for ourselves, and that's actually what we do for our customers as well. So if you have an interest, you have a need there with your outreach, you can find us at getfistbumps.com. So, hey, let's get on with Lee.
Hey, well done, Brandon.
Thank you.
Yeah, Lee, welcome back again. And, I know we have some really good things we're going to dig into, but kind of quickly reacquaint everybody who you are, what your background, what you do, all that kind of fun stuff.
Sure. Again, I'm Lee Sauls. I'm a sales management strategist. My firm is Sales Architects. You've probably seen my videos, probably on LinkedIn, Lee's Lessons, short videos, 60 to 90 seconds, get in, get out. I've written books, Sales Differentiation, Sell Different, and I have a new one coming out in September titled The First Meeting Differentiator.
And we already have you booked in October to come talk about your new book. Yes, we do.
Yep. So I'll be a 3-timer. So I'll get a 3 on the lapel.
You could get the 5 by the end of the year if we keep rolling like this.
We're going to work on it.
Keep writing books, Lee. We'll keep bringing you back.
Thank you.
All right. Well, so, today we're going to, hold on one minute. I have to stop all my beeping here. All right. So, Lee, we're going to talk today about custom sales playbooks. Mm-hmm. I guess the first question that comes to my mind is, well, why wouldn't most organizations not have a custom sales playbook? I mean, and maybe what do you define as that custom sales playbook?
Great question. And so this comes back to something we talked about during our first interview. And you may recall we talked about this fallacy that companies have that they hire great salespeople. Does that ring a bell? See, I don't believe that there's this entity called a great salesperson. It doesn't exist. And I can prove it. I love it when executives take me to task on that. I'll say, how many of these so-called great salespeople, if you hire great track record, polished look, gift of gab, but they failed in your company. If you believe in great salespeople, then you must sign up for one of the following, given that they failed. Either this salesperson showed up at your doorstep and completely forgot how to sell, or your company is the worst company in the history of business to sell for. It's got to be one of those two if you believe in great salespeople. See, the issue is the
Hey,
placement.
I have a question though, Lee, before you go on.
Yeah.
What percentage of the people answer that question, yes or no? Like what percent have that, strikeout when they hire the quote unquote great salesperson?
Everyone.
Everyone. Okay.
Every employer has countless stories of what they believe they were hiring a great salesperson, and then 90 days later they're walking that salesperson out the door. And of course, it's always the salesperson that who failed. The company had no responsibility for that failure. Rock star on day one, dud 90 days later. So the issue is the placement of the word great. Greatness isn't a standalone quality. It's an attribute of the relationship between a salesperson and a specific role in a company. I believe every sales role is unique, like DNA. The factors that lead to success, failure, underperformance are different in every sales role. So because executives have this belief that they hire great salespeople, why do I need a playbook? They should be able to come in here on day one and go generate $1 million of revenue, at least by the end of the week. That's the flaw. So when I talk about a playbook, if you think about when you extend that offer, that salesperson is going to arrive on your doorstep with knowledge and skills. Knowledge and skills that you love so much during the interview that you extended an offer. But what's missing when you don't have that playbook in place is the bridge that connects the potential with the reality in the role. That's the flaw. And like I said, it's founded in this belief we're looking for great salespeople. So if we find a great salesperson, we don't have any work to do. They're just going to produce all this wonderful revenue by themselves.
I've got a personal example of that. When my second company, we had a system, we had a playbook that we followed. We did extremely well. Upon selling that company and then me doing, kind of a consulting, I couldn't sell anything and I couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. And it took me a while, a failure, to realize I didn't bring a system. I didn't have a process. I wasn't taking my buyers through the appropriate stages, one step at a time. Yeah. I think in arrogance, overconfidence, I just got in and just started having conversations with people. And I had a lot of great conversations and very few signed contracts.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. And every executive I talk to has stories like that. And they all trace back to, I think I'm bringing on great salespeople. They should be able to figure it out on their own.
Yeah. So you've said before about organizations operate in entrepreneurial chaos. Mm-hmm. What is that, and what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So if we build off of what I mentioned before, and we look at what I call the sales organization environment spectrum, there's two endpoints. There's entrepreneurial and execution. And this is going to be the first time in your career that you hear the word entrepreneur in a negative context. If your sales organization is described as entrepreneurial, that is not a compliment. What that means is you're hiring salespeople to go figure it out on their own, blaze their own trail, create their own systems, and we're all going to pray that they figure it out and we get some revenue out of it. That's what an entrepreneurial system is. When you go to the other end of the spectrum and we look at execution, these are companies that have fully defined how to sell for them, define the strategy, define the process, provided tools, all documented in a playbook. And the reason it's called execution is you bring salespeople on, you say, we have the answers. You just need to follow the playbook that we've put together. Now, that being said, we don't want to take personalization out of it. We're not trying to create sales robots. The purpose of the playbook is to give them the framework to succeed. That's the purpose of it.
So I work with a lot of sales organizations that I don't know if they would consider themselves very sophisticated, but they'll say that they have a playbook. Mm-hmm. And when you start to unpeel that onion a little bit, that playbook is, well, we have an opportunity or a sales process, right? Contact, demo, proposal, right, whatever. obviously, I think there's a bit more into the playbook than your sales funnel or your sales process. What are kind of the ingredients of a successful playbook,
Mhm.
and then how do you customize that? And is it customized at the organization level or at the individual level, or both possibly?
Yeah, so great question. What you found is actually rare. A lot of times, what I find when a company says, "Sure, we have a playbook," it's a product catalog. Here's
Okay.
everything we sell. Here's the features and functions of everything we sell.
Okay.
So let's come back to the premise that I mentioned before, that when we extend that offer, that person arrives with knowledge and skills, and we have to help them bridge that gap, if you will, to apply the knowledge and skills in the role. And you mentioned custom. Custom is geared towards the organization. And if there's different sales roles, you need variations for each sales role. But I'll give you an example of one of the common components that I work with companies to put in place, starting with a decision influencer analysis. A good friend of mine, I don't know if he's been on your show, Antarctic Mike. I was talking to him the other day, and he shared this great expression. He says, before we can see them as a prospect, we need to see them as a person. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And that's what a decision influencer analysis is all about. We need to understand what are the goals, concerns, priorities that this person has that we're going to be calling on. Let's use a CFO for an example, that we can address. And the beauty of today is we have this little tool called ChatGPT. And you can go into ChatGPT and create a prompt that says, what are the concerns, goals, objectives, and priorities that a manufacturing CFO has today? And it's going to give you a list, 10 to 12 of them. For that list, you then take it apart and say, which ones can we address? And how can we address it? So let's say of that 10, there's 5 that you can address. That's content that you would put in your playbook that says, for a manufacturing CFO, here are the 5 biggest concerns that they have today that we can address and how we can address it. You know, that type of analysis a year or two ago took a lot of research work. Now it takes about 10 seconds in ChatGPT and you get the raw information.
Yeah, and I mean, I would push that a little bit further. Like we have a custom GPT that we created for this purpose. It's all pre-prompt around it. So all we do is drop in the URL of the company, and we get the initial information, and then we can go dig deeper on an individual. We take one of the persons that we're speaking to, talk about them, and we get all that information kicked out to us. It's something that in 10 minutes, you can be really prepared for a meeting that, as you said, it would have taken hours, which normally it wasn't done because it took hours and nobody had to do it. So you were showing up for these meetings, trying to play catch up from the first second on the call.
And Brandon, you're touching upon something really important. I'll talk about tier 1 and tier 2. So tier 1 in the playbook would be manufacturing CFOs and the 5 primary concerns, objectives, goals, and priorities that they have and how we can address them. Tier 2 is getting specifically to this manufacturing CFO at the ABC company, right? That's what you're getting into when you're talking about pulling in their website and now being able to personalize the outreach for that specific individual.
Yeah.
So
go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say, so it sounds to me, Lee, like what you're saying is the custom playbook is a bit more general. In other words, it's not customer or prospect specific. These are things that would be relevant to all of your, or potentially relevant to all of your prospects and customers that are there. Then Brandon, you got to go, and I think this should, and tell me, Lee, if I'm wrong, but then I think if I'm the next part of the playbook would be, okay, how do you utilize that to actually research a prospect or a customer like you were describing there? And I agree, the tools are way better, and some of the new research tools that are out there are pretty amazing on what you can find.
Absolutely. So imagine in the playbook, it would have that information about the manufacturing CFO, the 5 that we talked about. And then after that would be an instruction to the salesperson, which is to get to that tier 2. Go to this website, enter their website in, et cetera, so that you can personalize it for the manufacturing CFO of ABC Manufacturing.
Bob says that you sound like Dr. Mark Siegel.
I don't know who Dr. Mark Siegel is.
I don't know if I know Mark Siegel. Do you know?
I don't either.
I don't know if I've been insulted or is that a compliment?
Bob's going to have to.
Bob, you have to tell us.
That's
I'm
funny.
curious though. I guess that's some research. Maybe I'll go into ChatGPT after this
Right.
and figure out
There
who
you
my
go.
signal
Who
is.
that is.
And I think Lee, you're you're talking about something that's near and dear to me, which is I think there's so much of this Gen AI and there's all these tools and everybody's trying to sell,
Yeah.
we'll comment for you, we'll create posts for you, do all that. I personally found, and I think for everybody out there, one of the biggest values of AI right now is about the research from a sales
Mhm.
perspective.
Yeah.
The amount of research, the positioning you can have, like our GPT, we preloaded it with who we are, and when we start putting in just URLs and names, we start getting information on how do we combine who we are with what they are. What topics do we bring to the table that are really important and
Mhm.
valuable to them? And like I said, 10 to 15 minutes prior to a call, you feel equipped and ready to have a good conversation, and then
Mhm.
move them into, I want to jump into the details of these playbooks and how you use that
Yeah.
then to move them in through, maybe I always call them the different stages of that conversation or the stages of the sale.
Yeah. And so let another way you mentioned research. Something else that ChatGPT is absolutely wonderful with is you create a draft of a prospecting email, put it in ChatGPT, create a prompt asking ChatGPT to make it better and more compelling. You're never going to copy paste and use that one, but every single time I get ideas that make whatever it is I'm typing an email about better.
Yeah.
Great,
And
great sales tool.
Yeah, and I think going to that deeper level of the company and that person, and asking GPT to rewrite what you wrote specifically for this company,
Mhm.
this industry, this person, and like that, it makes you sound a lot smarter and a lot more researched.
Exactly. So another piece commonly in a playbook, a competitor analysis. Now you could write war and peace for every single competitor. You don't need that. Two sides of a ledger. Why we win, why they win. What are the factors that would lead us to win, and what are the factors that lead them to win? Because the salespeople need to be armed with that. And price doesn't go on either side. The reason is if you're losing on price, more often than not, you've been outsold. That's the reason. I mean, there's other factors, but so price doesn't go on either side of that ledger, except if we're talking about cost basis, which is totally different. So if I'm manufacturing in China, for example, and they're manufacturing here, different cost basis, and of course that's something that should be captured in there. But in general, just saying they win because of price or we win because of price, that's a cop out. We don't put that in there. But a very simple analysis for every entry, say, here's what we do, here's what they do, and here's why this affects the decision. So a three-step process for each entry on the why we win side. On the why they win, here's what they do, here's what we do, and again, here's why that affects the decision process. So it's a very straightforward, simple analysis that a salesperson can go into, quickly get educated on what they need to know when they're up against a particular competitor.
So, Lee, just to clarify, what we're talking about is kind of pre-initial conversations with the customer as part of the playbook.
I'm talking about the entire continuum. So it could be it's a finalist presentation. We're up against these other guys. All right,
Got
I
it.
need to go to my playbook here and see what do I need to know about this particular competitor. So
So
it's
Brandon,
it's not tied to any phase as far as when you use it.
That
It's
makes sense.
it can be applied at any time.
yeah, that was going to be my question is, it sounds like what you're building is, I'll call it a knowledge base, right? For the salesperson to have access to however, whenever, and however they need it.
Yeah,
You also, though, incorporate, and maybe you were going to get to this, the process itself, right? So,
absolutely.
okay. And
Step
so
by
like,
step.
yeah. So where does that fit in? And maybe we're just jumping the gun a bit, but,
A
so
little
what,
bit. I mean, we're talking about some foundation pieces
okay.
right
Okay.
now.
Good, good, good.
Decision influencer, the competitor, and I'll give you a third one.
Okay.
Differentiators. What are our differentiators? How do we position them in a meaningful way? Why does anybody care about these differentiators? Who cares about these differentiators and under what circumstances? So we all like to, oh, we have is all differentiated. Great. Put it in the playbook so the salesperson has that content and knows when and how to use it. So that's a third foundation piece, very important when you're putting a playbook together. So now you mentioned about the process.
Hey, before we go any further, so I
Yeah.
just want to replay what you, because I think this is awesome, right, Brandon, is think about
Mhm.
this, right? how many times do we go into the process without really knowing what the hell we're doing, right? But with Lee's foundational pieces there, you understand the ideal customer who you're dealing with. You understand the competitive landscape, if you will, why you win, why you lose, that are there. And the third piece, and when you basically now have those kind of key pieces there, the differentiators, the competitive piece and the customer piece, now you can move into the process, I believe, much more causatively on how you're going to then move that prospect through. But it sounds to me, as you call them, Lee, foundational.
Yeah.
That needs to be something as a salesperson I understand really, really well before I go into the process.
Absolutely. And
And my
coming back
guess
to,
is,
I'm sorry.
my guess is you started in the beginning saying, all these great salespeople that quote fail, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of these great salespeople may be using foundational elements and other things from their previous company,
That
not
happens.
from the company that they're into right now.
That absolutely happens. Yeah. So if we come back to that spectrum we talked about, you got entrepreneurial on one side, and you have execution on the other. So entrepreneurial, I'm not giving them any of this stuff. Go figure it out. Execution, I'm giving you these tools so that you can put together a strategy.
And that's where then, so they've got the tools, and then I don't want to keep using the word entrepreneurial, but it allows some freedom for personal nuance or personal style,
100%.
personal approach. But if at the core, they got to create this foundation and then move into the rest of the playbook, which are like the stages of the process.
Well, I mean, if you look at the name of my firm, Sales Architects, right? I build a framework for an organization, but I don't get down to the level and say, memorize this word or memorize this phrase or this expression, because you need that personalization piece. But I'm going to put a framework in place for you to help you to succeed.
One more question before we let you get going to the next part. Do you find that, because I think the three foundational elements that you just talked about are pretty global, right, to any sales industry or
There's
whatever.
one more we haven't gotten to yet, but keep going.
Okay, well, once we get to that fourth one and that one more, I assume then that based on the industry or whatever, there might be some other sort of specialized foundational elements that you would incorporate in the play. Because I think we were talking
Yes.
before the show, we work a lot with manufacturers and distributors that sell to existing customers over and over and over. So
Yep.
they have some nuance, so to speak, on some of those foundational things that may be required that a tech sales guy may not need to have actually.
Yep. So I've worked with some clients that have said, we just want this huge playbook and put in all the different market segments. And then I have others where I've created unique playbooks. So one just for builders, one just for architects, one just for designers, etc. So you can do it either way. The key is to have the content readily available for your salespeople.
All right, let's do number 4. We'll stop at
Number 4 is a target client profile. You said an ideal client profile, and that is something I don't think any salesperson needs. And here's why. An ideal client profile in most cases says, if all the stars were to align, this is the kind of business we'd love to have. It's like a lottery ticket. It's a 1 in a gazillion chance you ever find one of these. If you look up the word ideal in the dictionary, what does it say? Is it existing only in one's imagination? Not very helpful in sales. A target client profile says, this is who will perceive meaningful value in what we offer. Every sales minute should be spent in the pursuit of those opportunities. And I actually have a free template. Can I give out the URL?
Of course.
Okay. I don't know if everyone's going to be able to remember this, so write this down. It's targetclientprofile.com. And you can download my template for free. It's a 12-step program. Not that kind. This is a 12 components that will give you clarity, distinct clarity on who will perceive the most meaningful value in what you offer. And when you understand that, it also gives deals the greatest likelihood of coming to fruition. Now imagine that it's, again, those 4 foundational pieces for the salespeople that say, basically, these are the ponds to fish in, folks, because this is who's going to perceive the most meaningful value. Now, from there, we get into the how.
Okay,
Right?
hold
We
on.
got the
Sorry,
foundation.
one more thing.
We got questions.
Just one more. It's like
Right.
Columbo.
I know. One more thing.
I think I just aged myself when I said Columbo.
I remember that way too well. what's the difference? Clarify number 1 and number 4, because it sounds like there's maybe some similarities from the
Number one.
foundational element, and then the fourth.
Okay, so we have the decision influencer analysis, which is all about the role. So,
Okay.
CFO in manufacturing, for example. Okay. We had the competitor analysis, which is the competitive landscape that we got into. We have the differentiators, right? Understanding what our differentiators are, who's going to care about them, when they're going to care about them, how I'm going to position them in a way that someone's going to care about them. And then we have the target client profile, which actually pulls from some of those 3 other pieces to come together.
Got it. Okay. So the first one is that decision maker individual, number 1, or individual.
The decision influencer, right. So you would have one of those for every role that your salespeople engage with in the process. So it might be a vice president of manufacturing, it might be a CFO, maybe it's a VP of HR, et cetera, et cetera. Because what's keeping them up at night is going to be different for each role. And how you can help them is going to be different because what they care about is different.
Okay.
So, Lee, I want to ask a question on between ideal customer profile and target customer profile.
Yep.
Is that just, I mean, I get there's a bit of a nuance that you're trying to like get people to look at something specific. Mm-hmm. Is that a bit of splitting hairs?
Not at all. Okay. Not at all. And I actually put that in my book. It's not semantics. I don't have time for semantics. It's a totally different concept because in most cases, when I ask a company about an ideal client profile, has no structure to it, has a couple little elements in it, and I ask them how many of these match what's in your portfolio, maybe 1, maybe. Right? So that's not what the salespeople need when, boy, we'd love to have this kind of business that's of this size, this magnitude, this type of solution. The everyday sale is what we're looking to capture in the target client profile. And that's what that worksheet helps to define for sales organizations. Who's going to perceive the most meaningful value? And then every morning, the salespeople are looking for those types of opportunities.
So that starts to get into kind of the psychographics and the firmographics a little bit deeper into it. Like
it does.
What motivates them specifically?
Exactly. You're exactly right.
Okay.
Yep. So it gets into things like what's the right size to pursue? Too big, too small, however you define size, that's a component of this. A lot of the clients I work with, there is this window here where this is too small, they won't perceive enough meaningful value. This is too big, we really don't play well here. This is the sweet spot. This is where we need to be focused. And then the rest of it, you see when you download that worksheet, you'll see the 12 components in there. There's 2 questions. Who's going to perceive the most meaningful value based on this topic? And what would give deals the greatest likelihood of coming to fruition, again, based on that particular topic.
Hey, Lee, how long does it, and I know this probably varies from client to client, but the project of going through and nailing down these 4 foundational elements, is this something that takes weeks, months, days? What is the effort? I mean, I don't know about you, Brandon, but I would think there's a lot of companies that I know we deal with that couldn't answer a lot of those questions very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. So when I do this with clients, we do it in a workshop format. So everybody's learning together. So I'll pull the salespeople together and we'll have, let's say there's 10 people on the sales team and there's 5 competitors, break them into teams of 2. Each one of them does that research. They present it in the group. The group then weighs in, provides their commentary, boom, you publish. Same thing on the decision influencer side. 10 salespeople, 5 decision influencers, pair them up, have them do the research, present to the overall group, make the edits. And then collaboratively on the target client profile, on the differentiators, there's a series of steps there that the team goes through to highlight what their primary differentiators are. And then from a circumstantial perspective, so let's say I find 10 differentiators that we have. They're not all relevant to all people in all situations. So then we figure out, based on each one of them, when are they relevant? I call it the big 3. If you can only talk about 3 differentiators, given the circumstance, what are the 3 most compelling ones? And we go through that exercise and identify those. And then we come up with strategies how to communicate those in a meaningful way.
So I understand like that from a playbook perspective, let's take the differentiator. In group brainstorm, you come up with 10. Mm-hmm. And then the idea with the playbook, if for each salesperson in every situation, they're going to pull the top 3 that are most relevant to that conversation, and
Correct.
they have them, handy in their back pocket, ready to use when they need them.
Well, there's an and statement with that. I agree with everything you just said, but the playbook also has to say, and this is how you position those differentiators in a meaningful
Of
way.
course. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not just the differentiator, but how to explain it, how to position it,
Correct.
how to message it. And then
Right.
using GPT with a specific company, you could even dial it down even more to that
Absolutely.
specific company. And even if you know who the other competitor is, you could even take it down even further.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's
So can
exactly
you
what
get
you're doing.
these? Can you get this kind of nailed in that workshop in a day, where at least you've got a fairly solid foundation?
Usually I'm doing this work virtually in 1 or 2 hour sessions. So when you say a day, yes, most of that could get done in a single day together.
So 8 or 10 hours, you could get all
Something
this.
like that. Yeah.
Perfect. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. That's
And
awesome.
so much of that is just getting out of their head what they probably already know with a little bit of research, but
Right.
getting it out on the table and then organizing it in a way where they all have that collective aha moment and go. And then I think, and I've done these exercises in my companies where you go,
Mhm.
crap, that's why we lost that deal, or that's why this one
Exactly.
came through really easy. Like
Yep.
and all of a sudden you see the puzzle pieces and the bigger picture makes a lot more sense. And I think it also gives confidence to salespeople to walk them through that process.
And I'll tell you, finding the differentiators isn't that hard. Remember the analyses we did. Why you win? Why you win, you're winning because those are differentiators that are meaningful to people. So you look at those, in aggregate and say, okay, so that belongs on our list. You look at the decision influencer analysis on how we can help, and that's another breeding ground to find those differentiators. So it's not like you're sitting there with a blank canvas saying, what are our differentiators? You actually have a starting point because of that work.
Yeah. Can I give this as an example? Is end of third quarter, early fourth quarter, I can't remember exactly when it was, is I took a step back and started looking at from this, customer profile. I'm scared to use the word ideal now, but one of the things that bubbled up to the surface on why we win and with some of the, a lot of the customers we spoke to, and it had to do with our playbook on how we use content in LinkedIn to grow reputations versus a lot of other LinkedIn tools that are automation, pitchy messages, and all that. So we brought the playbook up to the surface and started talking more about that because we discovered this is a big differentiator. It gives people confidence that there's a system, not just, we're going to go play on LinkedIn now and close our eyes and hope for the best.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So should we start talking a little bit about the sales process
Yeah.
itself?
Unless we have about 10 more questions, Brandon, we want to ask before.
I know. So poor Lee's like, let me get to the meat. Right?
Yeah.
No, that's fine. This is great conversation. You know what? If we don't finish, you can have me back on like
That's
the
true.
next couple of weeks, and I'm going to be
Lee's
on my way
really
to
bucking for
getting that badge here. Okay. So what's the first step in most sales organizations? Prospecting. Again, we love the knowledge. We love the skills they brought to the table that we extended an offer, but how do they apply it in this role? So the first thing we've got to look at as far as a consideration in the playbook, is this a takeaway sale or a demand gen sale? And I'm going to use a bathroom environment to describe those two. A takeaway sale is you're buying toilet paper, but you're not buying it from me. And I'm saying you should be buying it from me. Demand gen is you're buying toilet paper, you should be buying my bidet. So it's a totally different solution for the same problem.
I don't think anyone's ever used the word bidet on our show. So
yes,
good job there.
yes, all right. Are you saying I'm different? Because, I'm all about differentiation.
Hey, you're different. So different.
I wonder how many people even know what a bidet is. So we don't have those very often here in the U.S.
You know what? I hadn't seen one. So we were on vacation this past summer in Venice. Yeah. And I go in the bathroom like, why are there two bowls in here?
As long as you didn't think it was a water fountain, you're good.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
The first time I saw one of those is so stupid. I thought it was something you stuck your head in and washed your hair. That was when I had hair back in the day.
Now, the bigger question is, did you try it?
No, I think I was smart enough to ask somebody first. I don't think I lived in there.
And they said, wrong end, Tom, wrong end.
maybe depending upon the point of view. All right, sorry.
Okay, so let's say it's a takeaway sale, meaning they're buying toilet paper, but they're not buying it from you. Here's the flaw that I find that most salespeople have and why they can't prospect. One of my favorite questions to ask them, this has to be in the playbook. If I agree to a meeting with you, what do I get out of it? And learning about your company and what you offer is not what I consider meaningful value, because I already have a supplier that I'm buying toilet paper from. And when I ask salespeople that question, the most common answer is a deafening silence, because they've never thought about that from that perspective. Mm-hmm. So the new book that I have coming out, the First Meeting Differentiator, I'm on this mission to eradicate the discovery mindset. Because when we think in terms of a discovery, we plan for that interaction with, here's what I'm going to ask them, here's what I'm going to tell them, and here's what I'm going to show them. Mm-hmm. We don't give the slightest thought to any meaningful value that the person we're meeting with is going to get out of it. It's all about us. So the expression that I'm looking to have everyone embrace, I didn't develop the expression, but I totally buy into it, is a consultation mindset. When we think in terms of a consultation, think about the last time you went to the doctor. You go for two reasons: to become wiser about your circumstances and understand potential remedies. You wouldn't go to the doctor if you thought you were a research project, but that's how we treat prospective clients when we see the world through the lens of discovery. And when you think in terms of a consultation, you start thinking about the meaningful value that someone's going to get out of that interaction. And when you define that, now we come back to prospecting, because it's so hard to get a meeting. But if you convey in your prospecting messaging, by the way, when we get together, I'll share with you some best practices that other manufacturing CFOs are taking advantage of today. Okay, that's worth it to me to spend some time with you, because I'm going to become wiser, something that's going to help me in my role. So that's something, again, that I advocate for including in your custom playbook, which is, if they're already buying this toilet paper from someone else, why should they meet with me? Because, as you know, salespeople really struggle in that environment because they already have a supplier. So how do I get in the door? Because we can't get in the door, we're never going to talk about revenue. So that's one important piece. I advocate, excuse me, for getting down to messaging. Put the email templates in there. Provide variations, 4, 5, 6 variations. Put the voicemail template in there. Again, variations. If not, now the salesperson is going to be sitting there going, all right, so what should I put in this email? Why do you want them doing that? Make it easy. If you know what should be in there, make it a copy and paste.
Yeah, it was. I got distracted there for a second, Lee. I was reading Bob's comment. It was a good one. I liked it. If you want to put that up, you want the next meeting, depending on the industry vertical. There's going to be a series of meetings. Your goal needs to be to get the next meeting because the prospect found value in what you said.
Amen.
That is missed so often, and we've experienced on the show how often terms like, buyer centric or consultative are discussed, but then, you start peeling down that onion with people and you find out that they just don't do that. They use the term, oh yeah, we're very buyer centric. You start asking questions like, are you though? Are you really though? The discovery call isn't very buyer centric the way most companies position it.
Well, I've got a question for Bob. I feel like he's broken into my computer, because that is the core foundation of what you're looking for in the first meeting, is to create enough meaningful value that they want to continue having interactions with you.
And I think,
Bob, stay out of my PC.
And the challenge I find with a lot of companies, they don't even know what that means. Like, what is, and that's why I like to use the word stages. Like, if the first call, we call it, it's a first call, but your stage one, what do you want to discover? What do you want to share?
Yeah.
And what does it take to get them to ask you or want the next conversation? And too often it's, again, as you said at the very beginning, training, if you will, is here's our product, here's our features, here's what we do, pat them on the behind and say, go get them.
And I take a slightly different approach, Brandon, from what you were describing. When I look at that first meeting, the consultation, I start at the end and say, this was a great meeting with a manufacturing CFO if we accomplished what? And we identify what all those outcomes are. So imagine in a matrix, here's all the outcomes that we're looking to accomplish in that first meeting. Across the rows, what are we going to ask? What are we going to say? What are we going to show? What are we going to do to achieve each one of them?
That's good.
Because if we go the other way, let me make my list of questions and my message points. There's an infinite number of questions you can ask, but only so many someone's going to tolerate. And still, you may not even hit the mark. You can talk about your company for 16 hours, but I don't think anybody's going to give you a 16-hour meeting. I don't think you'd want one anyway. But if you think of it in terms of a project plan, here's what success looks like. Let's say there's 22 items on the list here that would make for a successful consultation with a manufacturing CFO. And now the questions you're going to ask are a function of the outcomes on your list. The information you're going to share is a function of the outcomes on your list. The actions you're going to take are a function of the outcomes on your list. And all of that in the work that I do with developing custom playbooks, salespeople really appreciate knowing what does success look like in the first meeting, because I'm not walking out with a check, right, in complex sales. So what does success look like? What do I need to achieve? And you lay that all out and you say, okay, here's the portfolio that is considered success of desired outcomes. And then here's how you get there. Here are the questions to ask. Here's the information to share. Here are the actions to take. Prescribe it is the way I describe it.
We, and Brandon, I think it was Anthony Iannarino, I can never get his last name right, that we had this conversation with a bit ago, where he was talking about, I want to get you, Lee, your take on this.
Yeah.
He said, whenever he does a discovery call, he comes in with a list of consulted, he goes in and say, hey, I want to share some industry knowledge, industry data with you, and so forth. And then he uses those topics to ask questions to the customer based around, well, what do you think about that? Right. So going back to your manufacturing CFO, hey, tariffs, are really, I want to share you an update on some of these tariffs. What do you think about that? And what is that going? And then that leads to a discussion that ultimately gets the answer that he's looking for versus going in like with an agenda of 10 questions. Is that kind of what you're proposing or
and I think, well, because what you're saying is provide meaningful value. And I'm very familiar with Anthony's a great guy and his work. And that's what he's advocating for. You've got to provide meaningful value during that interaction or there will not be another one. Yeah. And so what he's talking about is absolutely brilliant as a way to provide meaningful value during that interaction.
Yeah, I like that when Anthony said it. And I don't remember if it was Anthony's episode or around that time. Somebody said something that just brought it real clear to me and refined one of the things that we do, which is asking people before the first call in an email or whatever, hey, for this first call to be successful for you, what would you like to get out of it so I can make sure that I'm prepared to serve you well? I mean, I think that one, it helps a salesperson get prepared. Two, it helps the buyer understand going into it, wow, this is really going to be about me, which is a huge differentiation.
Absolutely.
I went through 3 demos. We're looking at some software. I went through 3 demos in the last month, and not one of them asked me at any point what I was looking to accomplish. They just went into their routine. And usually like 15 minutes into it, I'm like, I'm done. Thank you. I'm done. And they had no idea why they lost me. I didn't bother telling them at that point, but there was no consideration for what I was really trying to accomplish.
Well, there's a second part of what you just said, Brandon. Back to the playbook. If you're in a place where what you sell, like if you're selling software, demos, there's 14,000 different ways you can demo a software product. What's the right one to demo yours? What should you be doing before the demo, during the demo, after the demo? The company should have prescribed that, put it in the playbook instead of the salesperson coming in and the experience you just had. Yeah. That's when I talk about developing a playbook and having that, the steps of the sales process, you just hit nail on the head there.
And you spoke to the value of it. How many losses do you have that could have been wins if you just approach the conversation differently, which means taking the time, Tom, go slow to move fast, taking the time to actually train and equip your team to have and lead the right conversations.
Absolutely. Another component of the playbook, and no one likes to talk about this, I call it the Quincy program. Again, I'll be 56 next week. Quincy, for those of you who don't know, was a coroner back in the
I was wondering if
70s.
That's what you were talking about.
Yeah, that was exactly what it was. So he was a coroner.
It's murder.
Remember that Jack Klugman?
That's right. That was his favorite thing. It's murder. It's murder.
You have to do it with the underbite, though. Murder. So there's a dead body laying there, and he's got to figure out how it happened. Well, when we lose a deal, we need to figure out how this deal died. And the best thing you can do when a deal is lost is to figure out how it died so that you don't replicate those mistakes. So I advocate for having a Quincy program in place, call it whatever you want. I know I'm aging myself, so that when we don't win a deal, we understand why and we can make adjustments for the next time.
Again, go slow to move fast. If you solve that with one deal, you might, instead of losing 5, you might lose 3, and you got 2 wins out of it.
I'll give you another one. I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to have to tell me how many times you've heard this expression. People buy based on emotion and justify their decisions with logic. How many times in your career do you think you've heard that?
How many times have I said that?
Okay. If we recorded 100 sales interactions across all industries, I bet you the deed to my house that the entire interaction was logic. Maybe, if not 99, maybe even all 100. And I used to struggle with that because I go, wait a minute. Every salesperson on the planet has heard the expression, people buy based on emotion, justify decisions with logic, and no one does it. And I got to thinking about my sons, both played college baseball. And I remember when they were kids and they were learning to play the game. And you'd say, hit home runs. And they'd say, got it, hit home runs. Guess what? If you didn't teach them how to do it, they didn't hit home runs. So that's the issue in sales. We say, you got to arouse emotion. Well, how do you do it appropriately? So one of the things that I advocate for in a playbook is, remember during the decision influencer analysis, what's keeping them up at night? And we had 5 issues that we address. Well, for every one of those issues, there's a way that individual feels about those before we ever walk in the door. How do they feel about those issues and why do they feel that way? There's a way we want them to feel about those 5 issues as we walk out the door. How do we want them to feel and why should they now feel that way? Mm-hmm. That meeting, the consultation or a demo, whatever stage that you're in, is the bridge connecting those 2 emotional endpoints. And the tools you have to transition their emotions are the questions you ask, the information you share verbally and visually, and the actions you take before, during, and after that interaction. And so one of the things that should be in the playbook is, as you're looking at each phase of the process, is that emotional spectrum, understanding for this individual, this is what's keeping them up at night. This is how they feel about those issues before you ever walk in the door. Here's how you want them to feel afterwards and the reasons for both. And here's how you transition their emotions.
And that's part of winning that next meeting, because if they feel understood, they feel like you're in an advisory position based on the information you shared or the stories you shared, then they're going to get it. And that goes back, Tom, to what you're saying, what Anthony said, he would go in and you'd share like, hey, this is what's going on in your industry. How do you feel about it? What he was sharing, he knew what he was doing, right? He knows like these are the things that are going to tap into the like, oh yeah, that scares the crap out about us too. Right. Yeah, this is what's going on in your industry. This is some of the ways that people are handling it. Right. How are you addressing it? And all of a sudden they feel like this person is guiding us. Mm-hmm. The emotion of, hey, we're following somebody who's a guide and is going to lead us to the promised land.
Exactly. So another piece that you want to have in your playbook. We've told salespeople since the beginning of sales time, features and benefits. I added a word to that, features, benefits, and boredom. Right? Because we go in and we lecture on the features and benefits. Great. What we should be doing is sharing relevant stories. And why don't salespeople tell stories? Because it hasn't been documented anywhere. If I was involved in the deal, so I know the history of it, now I can share the story. But if I wasn't involved, I don't know it. So if the company can aggregate stories where they say, here's someone that had this particular challenge, just like you, here's what they were looking to accomplish, here's what we put in place, and here's what the results of that were. Now that becomes interesting. So instead of saying, we talked before, a lot of companies, they say, yep, we got a playbook, it's a product catalog. In a sales playbook, you have the stories, the little vignettes that your salespeople can tell that someone goes, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. I love that. My second company, and this was 20 years ago, we had part of our playbook was we had all the questions we got, which were normally, there was about 10 that you would get. Mm-hmm. And we had a story to share for every question in order to tap into that. And it was a story and then an open-ended question and then shut up, let them talk.
And Brandon, so let's say you didn't have that. You hired me as a salesperson today. How would I know these stories?
If they're not documented, you don't, or you pick them up potentially through osmosis.
Exactly. Hopefully. So what do I rely on? Features and benefits. That's all I got.
Yeah.
And boredom.
And boredom.
Yeah, I'm a quick learner. Quick learner.
Well, Lee, I want to make sure we get through everything before
we only got to the prospect step, right? So don't we have? We were on the, or did we move along on the how part?
Well, we're still getting into how. So let's go back to prospecting. So we had talked about create the templates, lay out a framework, and because when you look at prospecting, there's two sides of the equation. When we look at the strategy, a qualitative and a quantitative. So the qualitative is the messaging. The quantitative is, salespeople don't make enough attempts. I left 2 messages, sent an email, they didn't respond, therefore they're not interested. Find a study today that doesn't say it takes double-digit attempts to engage someone. It all says that. The number just keeps going up. So putting what I call a prospecting rhythm, some call it a sequence, again, in your playbook, here's what you do on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, with different techniques where they can apply the messaging you've already put in place. Again, if you're starting to visualize this execution, I don't need to innovate messaging. It's right there in my playbook for me.
Yeah. I like that. I like how you're bringing all the assets to the table and putting it in structure so that a salesperson can follow it with confidence. And then the result is the buyer gets confident too, because they're going down a path.
Yeah. I'll give you another one. What sale wouldn't be complete without the price objection? So you got 10 salespeople. Each of them encountered the price objection. No playbook. Every one of the 10 does it whatever way they think is best. How does that make sense? Right? We should figure out what is our best practice and say, this is the way, when this issue comes up, this is how you navigate the discussion.
It seems like you could almost have an
Did I get gonged? I think I got gonged.
I think that was, I think we all got gonged.
That was me. I didn't silence my notifications. Sorry, that was a text coming in.
Again, I'm showing my age with the gong show, but go ahead.
The gong show. Oh my gosh.
That's why I said that I get gonged.
It seems like you would almost have like an FAQ, right, in the playbook. Some frequently asked questions, frequently asked objections, frequently asked scenarios. Right, exactly, along the way.
Then I'll give you another component. I call it conquering accounts. So one of the things in my work with clients, I'll see we have this client portfolio where here's what they're buying, here's what they could be buying, but there's never an initiative to conquer the account, meaning they should be buying everything that we offer instead of buying from multiple sources. Because if we don't do that, we're losing revenue and we're vulnerable to someone that comes in and has that story. That should be a component of a playbook as well. Say, how do we go from getting in the door to the Trojan horse and getting the whole thing?
So we're kind of running out of time. Brandon, we said we do 45 minutes. I think we're now going to do way over. But
I always say we shoot for 45 and end up at an hour.
An hour and 15, right? is Lee, let's kind of, and even if we need to do it quickly, what are the other steps in the how-to process? So I get through prospecting. What are some of the other steps I need to make sure are in that?
Presentation. Okay, so it could be a group presentation, could be a finalist presentation. I've got a 20 slide deck, right? What's the story? What's the messaging? How do I convey it? What should I do before that presentation? What should I be doing during it to get engagement? What should I be doing afterwards? Again, all things that should be captured there. If you're in a sale that there's trials and pilots, the only reason to take on a trial or a pilot is if it leads to getting the deal, right? That's the sole purpose of doing this, is to advance the process. Okay, so what do we need to do before? What do we need to do during? And what do we need to do after? All that captured in a playbook. I'm working with a client now in Australia, and we just finished developing that section of their playbook. They sell GPS devices for fleets. So part of their sale is that they do these trials. So what do you do before? What do you do during? What do you do after? And all of that's now captured in their playbook.
So you had prospecting. You had the second piece was, sorry.
So there's the first meeting, the consultation.
Yep.
There's deal obstacles, concerns, objections, stalls. Obviously these all need to, back to the word custom, right? You put in the relevant steps of your process. That's what goes in your playbook and how to execute each one. And the better you define what you want them to do and how you want them to do it, the easier it is to scale, the better chance you have your salespeople being successful in your organization.
For us tech sellers out there, you had mentioned presentation as one of the steps in there.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume, and we could probably do a whole episode on this, the demo step, which almost every tech seller is like the nirvana. Get the demo, get the demo,
Right.
get the demo. And yet I think that's probably one of the biggest sort of sales prevention steps that companies can do is poor demos and how they go about it. So I assume that would be another step in that.
Absolutely. If you do demos, right. So what should you do before? Things like who's going to be in the meeting or in the demo? What do they want to cover, et cetera, et cetera. Then when you look at a demo, there's a lot of different ways you can demo a product. So what is the best way based on what your company knows that someone's going to perceive meaningful value out of that interaction to lay it out? For example, in some cases, it makes sense to do it sequential. In others, it makes sense start at the finish line, then go back to the starting line and show you how you got there. You also don't want it to be you lecturing for an hour, no engagement. So as you're going through each part, what are the questions that you can bring up so it's conversational, not one-dimensional?
Yeah, I think a lot of demos are drink through the fire hose, right? You talk about features, benefits, and boredom. It's features, benefit, boredom, and overwhelm, right?
There you go.
And then they get off the demo and they're actually dazed and confused, and they're not ready to take the next meeting because they don't even know what to ask as to what to go next. I see a lot of demos really, hand grenading the sales process where it's unnecessary.
Right. And if you have 10 salespeople, each one of the 10 is doing that demo in whatever way they think is best because it hasn't been defined.
Yeah. I like Bob's comment. They love to open the hamburger menu and work their way down.
Nice. Hey, this is a little bit off topic, but Lyle was asking a question about how to sell in the supply chain to supply chain people in the RFP. I don't want to address it here, but Lee, do you have any links or anything that you can share with Lyle to help him on that?
I'll tell you what, Lyle, send me an email, lsalz, LSALZ at salesarchitects.com, and I'll send you some content there. But that's, again, something should be in the playbook. If you're normally dealing with purchasing or procurement, how do you appropriately engage with them? People ask me all the time, the best sales training I've ever been through is procurement training. Do you know that this procurement training, just like the sales training? These agents are being trained. So about 25 years ago, I had a chance to go through 3 days of procurement training. Felt like a spy, right? Because I'm learning how they're being taught to buy. And guess what? They're not being taught to buy cheap.
Yeah.
They are being taught how to evaluate a supplier's quality management system.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of our clients, Chris Dunn at Blue Hive Exhibits, they're actually going to a procurement conference to go learn because they're realizing how many times they get, they blow up in the procurement process. So they're spending time trying to meet procurement people. Yep. And then recently I met somebody here in Atlanta who was 20 plus years procurement, and now he's training and consulting people how to deal with procurement. Perfect. And he says it's a big opportunity that people haven't been doing. And it's like, you look at that and go, why have we not been training and coaching people how to navigate that very, very challenging?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I love that training so much. Twice I brought that procurement trainer into my sales meetings.
Smart.
It was absolutely brilliant. I mean, we're sitting here saying, what should we be telling them? What should we do with them? Well, let's ask the guy that's teaching them what to do.
Yeah. Tell them what you're looking for.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's super smart. It's like I tell my kids at the beginning of every semester, go talk to the teacher or the professor and say, hey, I want to do really well. How can you coach me? What should I be doing to do well in your class? And it's amazing. The other thing I tell them is it's amazing just by asking those questions and engaging them, how much help you get and how much leeway you get. If there's an answer that could go either way, you're going to win it because they care that you cared. And I think procurement's the same way.
Yeah, it's funny. I tell my kids the same thing when they were going through college. Build a relationship with the professor. Don't wait until the end of the semester. Go, please help me with my grade. You go there before a paper is due. You go there when you're preparing for an exam, and they will always help those kids that go to see him beforehand and say, you know what, I would focus your studies on this particular topic, or they'll look at the draft of your paper and say, I'd make a couple of tweaks here.
Yeah, Absolutely. Well,
So
Lee,
I think
did
Lisa,
we,
Lisa
yeah, I
summarized
like
it
that.
well, right? Selling from the same side of the table.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, good stuff, Lisa. Lee, did we hit all the meat? You have more things that we can,
I think we gave a good overview. If I
okay.
come back to Tom's question before about the different components, the key is to look at every step of the sales process and define how to execute it. That's the key.
right. So the playbook has two main parts. It has your foundational elements that we talked
Mhm.
about in the beginning, and then you have your process or your how-to parts.
That's right.
Obviously, then you would want to go through and make sure that there's alignment between
Mhm.
those. I think
Yep.
that would be a good exercise to make sure you've got that alignment back and forth
Yep.
between them. And now you have something to bring in a person with a lot of skill and a lot of ability
Yep.
and turn them into that great
I'll
salesperson.
give you one more. Brandon, before we went live, you were talking about a deal you're working on. You got 10 salespeople, all 10 presenting proposals. No playbook. Everybody's doing it whatever way they think is best.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? You create risk. Define this is how you should present our proposal.
But Lee, it takes time to do what you're saying. We don't have time to do this.
We have
We
calls
just,
to make. We have
yeah,
calls
we're just
to
going
make.
to keep losing 80% or more of our opportunities because we don't have
Mhm.
time to do this.
And the answer
Hopefully that
is
sarcasm was thick enough.
That's
it was
awesome.
very good. And my answer back to that is you're out there preaching what you're selling has ROI. I can't think of a better ROI for your sales organization.
Yeah,
Lee,
absolutely.
this has been great. I think, Brandon, this has been one of the most, I guess, tangible, get down to
Tactical.
detail, tactical shows we've
Yeah.
done in a while, and it's been great.
Yeah.
Lee, I'm sure there a lot of the listeners here would like to learn more, get more information from you. I know I do. So where do you want to
Thank you.
go to get that?
So I purchased a domain that forwards right to a relevant page. If you're intrigued by the subject of custom playbooks, if you go to mycustomsalesplaybook.com, it'll take you right to the page on my website. And while you're there, hit the home button. There's all kinds of videos and things that can help your sales organization improve performance.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Lee, where else can they find you? Is finding you on LinkedIn the best way if they want to message
Absolutely.
you? Yeah.
Yep. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I've got a YouTube channel on TikTok. I'm on Instagram, all the channels, and
Your
you'll
LinkedIn
find.
group. I
Oh
didn't,
yeah, yes,
until this past week when we spoke, I didn't realize your LinkedIn group had 560,000 people in it.
yes, yep. It's called Sales Management Executives, and you can join that group. And there's always tons and tons of content. It's the largest sales management group on LinkedIn.
Wow.
Excellent. Well, Lee, thank you so much again.
Thank you.
As always, it was excellent.
I
Great
think we're
fun.
going to
Keep
get
me
him.
going towards that 5-timers
Yeah,
club.
we're going to get him as 5 times this year, I think, Brandon. I think
Yeah.
it'll work
Oh,
pretty
we got 3 coming up in October with the new
Right.
book, and I'm already excited for that one.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much.
Yeah,
You're
and
welcome.
thanks for everybody for the great comments and conversation here. I think that some really, really relevant points today. So thank you to everybody who jumped in. And Brandon, do you know our guest next week offhand?
I do. Oh gosh, and Alec gave it to me right before we got on, and I can't remember. Sorry.
Okay. Well, it's going to be a good one. That's what
It'll
I
be
know.
a good one. Yeah,
So,
thanks
so-
for putting me on the spot and showing
yeah.
everybody how unprepared I was.
Well, if you had a playbook, you'd be better.
There you
Right.
go. I know
All
something that
right.
can help with that.
We
All
have the playbook. Alec told me. I just forgot.
All right.
Yeah,
Well, Lee can't help you with that.
that's right. That's right.
All right. Thanks again, Lee. Thanks again,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Have a great week, and we'll see everybody.